Hey guys, welcome to the Gods Unchained beta with the Professor. All right, today's video is for all you new and free-to-play players. I have a very special guest that's going to help me go through free-to-play decks for each god. So 6 free-to-play decks that will be presented to you, so that way you can get started and get competitive quickly. Hey guys, we have a special guest today in today's video. I am lucky to have SamBam here with me. We're going to be talking about free-to-play decks. Just a quick background on SamBam. Sam is a team member of Infinite Mana. He is also a content creator, usually streaming on Twitch, active on Twitter, and also one of the top Gods Unchained player. So I really appreciate him taking the time to sit with us here and talk about some free-to-play decks. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you for having me, Professor. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, very happy to talk about free-to-play decks, help out all these new players coming into the game. And I remember that you had a hand in sharing some free-to-play decks. Also, you do a thing on your stream giving away raffles of cards to new players and free-to-play players. So I really appreciate that. And
Hmm.
couldn't think of a better guy to do this with than you. So welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. Finished up weekend ranked. It was a bit rough. I think I went 18 out of 25 today. So uh, there's definitely a lot more people playing, and yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. I appreciate all the growth with the game, and I think it's people like yourself and other content creators letting players kind of get a preview on the gameplay and all that's really helpful. So let's focus in on some of free-to-play decks here. So I think Gods Unchained, when they recently, about a month ago now, November 10th, they released deck codes in the game, and they had asked a few players in the community to put together some deck codes. Along with those deck codes, they asked us to go ahead and put in some free-to-play decks as well. We have free-to-play Light, free-to-play Magic, War, Nature, Death, and Deception. So Sam and I will be going through each deck, each free-to-play deck. We're going to share our thoughts on it, some critiques, maybe some suggestions on how to improve it or leave it as is. So without further ado, we're going to go through the first one. The first one is a free-to-play Magic deck. This is one that Sam Bam put together. So I'll let Sam go ahead and take the reins here for a little bit on his deck.
Okay. Sure. So I guess starting out, I would say that it's kind of a harder deck to put together than some of the other decks, mostly because it really revolves around having Oni Spell Sword. And I mean, I'm like over level 1,000, and I think I have like 3 or 4. That being said, like you can buy them, but that would make it not free to play now that you can forge cards. Um, but yeah, it's pretty simple. Kind of try to snowball your Onis. That's like your main win condition. You have your Rune Moth for value generation. Your Oni provides ward for every creature, and any card you play gives your Oni +1 strength. So you kind of try and snowball. It's based around that. Uh, yeah. Something I would change now is Shield Bearer. It's recently got a pretty big nerf. It's a 0/1 instead of a 1/1. So I definitely recommend swapping that out. You can add another Wiccan Trapper, which wouldn't be bad with the zombie meta. Or what's the 1/3 Aether that
Trial,
gives you 1 health?
yeah, I was thinking about that, the Trial Spirit.
Trial Spirit. Yeah, I'd honestly probably swap them both out with Trial Spirits. Just yeah. And that being said, this deck isn't going to be as good as it was maybe a couple weeks ago with the armor meta. Armor meta.
Right.
Uh, yeah, what would you recommend changing on it to make it more competitive, at least towards Mythic, when everybody has a Guild Enforcer?
Right. So I think that's a good point to bring up. So a lot of the players that are coming into the game and trying out these free-to-play decks that we're going to go over, do keep in mind that a lot of these decks, like Sam mentioned, for example, on Oni Spellsword, an epic card, some of them will be difficult to get. But at the same time, as you're putting these decks together, you'll be making substitutions since you'll be starting out without some of these key cards. But at the lower level and the mid rank, you're going to be able to make these swaps and still run a somewhat successful deck. And that's because you're if you're staying true to the deck idea and the play style, the way the lists that are put together, they're fairly consistent. And that's what the key is at the lower and to mid rank is consistency. So you're able to then use that to kind of propel forward. So one caveat that we are going to mention with these free-to-play decks is the free-to-play decks can probably propel you to Mythic if you're a really good player and you're hitting some really good opponents to match up against. But at the same time, if you're able to make it to Mythic with free-to-play decks, you're probably at a skill level where you want to consider buying some cards and supplementing your collection to then be really competitive and do really good with the weekend rank and even tournaments. So having said that, Sam, actually I'm looking at these lists. I think you have a really good list that you put together, meaning that I like the low curve that you put with 13 one drops. I think the Assistant Alchemist is a really key card. You're able to, uh, if you have that in your opening hand, you're able to get a really good tempo turn right at the beginning. I like how you have a 3 mana creature in there to supplement the Oni Spell Sword. You have some good removals here with the Illuminate, Star Shard Bolt, Tracking Bolt. Having said that, you did bring up the armor meta currently. The only thing I would probably recommend besides the Shield Bearer getting changed is, I know this is kind of a Rune Rider is pretty strong in this deck, but maybe swapping out Rune Rider maybe just for a Ratify, and that's even questionable just because um, the Worm Breath can take care of some of the bigger creatures, but maybe just thinking about a possible Ratify to kind of get around another big creature. But other than that, I think this is pretty good. Um,
I think another card that would be maybe substitute the Rune Rider or swap out for something like if you don't have Assistant Alchemists or I don't know, just adding a Epiphany to the top end.
oh, right.
Because they are a welcome set, so everyone has them,
There you
and
go.
they do deal with the Guild Enforcers pretty well, and face
There you go.
like
Actually, yeah, that might be a better swap then. Maybe swapping out one Rewriter for a Epiphany. That's actually a good call there, Sam. And let me pull up the cards that we were talking about so everybody can see what we're talking about here. Because this video is geared towards new players, so we want to make sure that you guys can see what we're talking about. So the first one we talked about was the Trial Spirit as a substitution for the Shield Bearer. It's a 1 mana 1/3 that gives +1 health. Better stats than the Shield Bearer and +1 health can be crucial in that Magic deck. And then the one that we're talking about now is Epiphany, which is a 6 mana welcome set card. Good call on that, Sam. And it does 6 damage and also draws you a card. The 6 damage can go to a creature or directly to the face of the opponent. So that's a good suggestion, Sam. I do like that change actually. Um, Rune Rider is a good card, but I think up changing one to an Epiphany is a good call. Yeah, so this is the Sam's free-to-play Magic deck. We gave a couple suggestions, but I think this one's, as I mentioned, is a fairly decent deck that can get you started from the low ranks up to the mid ranks. Getting some of these epics and legendary might be a little bit more difficult, but
mm,
at the same time, um, the idea and the play style of the deck can stick together. You're looking for a low curve. You're looking to go really wide early on if you can with the Assistant Alchemist. Control your opponent's board with the bolts here. And then, as Sam mentioned, with the snowball combo effect of Oni Spellsword with the Rune Moth, etc., you're able to kind of create an overwhelming presence for your opponent.
yeah. I think the dream turn one of the deck would be 2 Assistant Alchemists and 1 Skeleton Heavy, and just go out. I think it's like 14 stats wide on turn one for 2 mana, and
Right.
it's just such a huge turn. And then you take a Mage Bolt and kind of just yeah. Mm.
Yeah, so I think what Sam's mentioning there is if you're going first and you have an Assistant Alchemist in your hand and another Assistant Alchemist and a Skeleton Heavy, the play would be turn one, you have 1 mana pip, you play your Bag of Tricks, now you have 2 mana. So you play one Assistant Alchemist. What that does is it discounts um, the Skeleton Heavy to 1 mana, and then you still have 1 mana left because you use your Bag of Tricks. You play your second Assistant Alchemist for the second mana, and then you discount the Skeleton Heavy again, so now it's 0 mana, and now you're dropping 1/2/2, another 2/2, and then a 2/4, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very definitely very strong opening to try to answer.
Yeah, I think it may be the most stats on board besides having a Pyramid Warden instead of a Skeleton Heavy for a
Right,
turn one play.
right
But
on.
yeah, I've done it once and it's really satisfying.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've never pulled that off, but yeah, I could imagine just
Yeah.
how
Yeah,
How fun
I
that
think
is
I was
playing.
playing. Yeah, I was playing against Slayer War, and they didn't do one damage to my face. Like they didn't even get their god power in. Just trying to like deal with the board state.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. Anyway, doesn't
cool,
happen
cool.
often.
Yeah. But yeah, if you see that in your hand, guys, keep that in mind. That's the combo. Don't mulligan it away. Get ready to have some what a call it a lottery start.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Nice. Cool, cool. All right, so this is Sam's free-to-play Magic deck. Let's go into the next one. This one's the free-to-play light deck put together by Copper Pitch. I'll go over this really quickly. He's recommending Summon Acolyte God Power or Lysander's Honor. He's talking about a also a low curve deck, 16 one-mana creatures here.
Wow.
Uh, some of the key cards here, obviously, is Asterius, a one of the top legendaries in the core sets. It took me 700 levels to get my first Asterius, but it was very satisfying when I finally got it. Some other cards that are hard to get. Keep in mind, guys, core epics are really hard to get because there's a bunch of epics, and you only get them every 10 levels, the epic packs. But two Blind Martyrs and two Ritual Rods, very strong cards. The
hmm
rest are rares and commons. Anything you see here, Sam, that you would think about changing?
I like the deck as it is. That being said, with the current armor meta, maybe adding a few beefier creatures. It's a it's a 5 mana 5/6. It's a Helion.
Battle Sworn.
You know, yeah, maybe two of those, just to beef the deck up. Because if you're getting towards Mythic and you're playing competitively, you're going to be running into armored creatures and just other big creatures. The game was a lot faster when these decks were put together, and just where the meta is now, I feel like having something big that can like trade favorably, opposed to just a bunch of low cost creatures that you're planning to buff, may be like a good or maybe even 3/4 Hunt Warden wouldn't be bad. Just
Warden, right?
right, just some more stats. Uh, Although yeah, 16 one drops is a lot. And I mean, on if someone drops an armor creature and you don't have your Asterius, I don't think you're going to be able to get through with this current deck. Like if a Guild Enforcer drops on turn 4,
Yeah.
it might just be an auto lose.
Yeah, let's talk
Um,
about a hard stop, right?
yeah, right. That's okay. He doesn't even run the Fist Imperious
Yeah.
Might.
Yeah,
That's free to play, right?
yeah, that was going to be
Yeah.
one of my suggestions was the Imperious Might. This is, I think, I wouldn't say a staple, but it's useful in a lot of light decks. A lot, especially if you're running a low curve aggro deck like this, a lot of your creatures have small attack. This is a, think of it as a get out of jail free card. I mean, it's going to hit your opponent's high attack creature usually. So that's a good call
hmm
there, Sam.
hmm how about you? Do you see anything else that stands out?
Yeah, I think I'm along the same lines of thinking as you. The 16 was really eye-opening here. I think I do agree with your comment about the meta change. I would probably take out the veteran archer. The one damage pings can be useful, but I think at this current meta, at 4 mana, I'd rather drop kind of what you said, either the Hunt Warden 3/4, even an Ogre, Wetlands Ogre 4/5, or the Battle Sworn
Okay,
that
yeah.
you talked about. I just don't think that the current meta is conducive to one damage pings. So I would probably take out the veteran archer. Um, Maybe a couple more of the one drops, like you said, even out the curve a little bit more, going lower out the ones and kind of build a little more curve onto the middle and the later top end of the deck. I do like the Imperious Might, like you said.
hmm
So yeah, what I would probably change, I like the two Brown Servants. I think that's nice in there. So I'd probably take out a veteran archer and maybe, you know,
Probably the Shield
yeah,
Bearers, maybe.
the shield bearer as well. So yeah, I think a couple of minor tweaks to this deck, as Sam said, and I agree with him, making it put a couple more stronger creatures, bigger creatures here, Imperious Might to help you control the board. But other than that, if you're able to build out a fairly decent wide board with this and you get Asterius, it's a lot of times that's your your ticket to the win already there. But I do agree that a little bit minor tweaks here, but other than that, it looks pretty good for me.
Yeah. I agree. I like it. That being said, Asterius, I have one. I'm level
1,000.
1,050
Yeah.
something, and I have one. So it's not like an easy card to come by any means. Yeah.
Yeah. So just yeah, for all the new players out there, legendaries are given out every 25 levels. You get a core legendary pack. If you happen to pack an Asterius early on, just keep in mind you got one of the better legendary, might be the best one. Some people would argue as well.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Assume that um they don't have Asterius.
Yeah.
Which do you keep this deck or do you build? I mean, I guess that's kind of like a really big question. What would you substitute for Asterius if they don't have it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually, like I said, I pulled my first Asterius at level 700, but I've been playing light decks because I've been doing my Flux wheel since I first started. So what I actually did was I I did not have Asterius, but I kept the same idea of a zoo type curve deck. And what I've experimented with, I started with the Holy Enchanter just to give a little bit more health to allow for trading. Back in the different meta that I was playing with before, +2 health was really huge. But as Sam is mentioning now, with the cards that are coming out with high armor that requires more attack, some another card that I've experimented with before was the Sing Song Satyr. Um, it's I think of it as a mini Asterius. It comes onto the board several turns earlier, like 3 turns earlier, because of the 2 mana to get from 5 to 6, and it's +1 strength. So I've experimented with the Sing Song Satyr in the past, but I will admit though, not using those two substitutions instead of Asterius does make a big difference in your win rate. But um, I have been able to pull it off and still run a successful light deck. So I could say that
Hmm.
those are definitely viable replacements.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the Sing Song Satyr, I really like that.
Thanks for bringing that out. It's always good to when we talk about these free to play decks, we're we're talking to players that are coming in with a limited collection. So any substitutions that you and I can come up with, definitely helpful to help people be able to pull off these decks. As we talked about, you're level 1,000, you have one Asterius. I'm level 700. I pulled my first one. So you know,
Right,
we,
yeah,
we got to
it's
be able to give suggestions to people that don't have the exact cards.
yeah. Awesome.
Cool, cool. All right. So let's go to the next deck here. Where the next free to play deck is a free to play Faces the Place War deck by Fake Muse. This one's a Slayer, God Power, still focused on the low end curve. And I think what you'll find, Sam will probably agree with this, is a lot of the free to play decks, you're really focused on low curve slash fast decks. And that's because a lot of the free to play cards, they kind of lose power around the 6, 7, 8 mana um, area just because there's just not that much choices up there. Would you say?
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. So I think a lot of players that have are experiencing the game, the suggestion is sort of this lower curve, and that's just really the I think where a lot of the stronger cards are, and that's why that's what's being suggested. And if you're thinking of playing a high-end mid-range to control type deck, you're definitely going to need expensive cards to be able to pull those off. So, what do you think about this deck, Sam?
Um, I like it. I've actually played it. I think it's pretty strong. Yeah. I think it's a great deck. I think he did a good job putting it together. I mean, I played it in Mythic, and I think I played a game or two on it and won them both. Yeah, I think I think Fake Muse is a really good aggro deck builder, and I know he plays a lot of War. He used to play in Rage War when the God Power was different, but he's adapted and he likes the Slayer, and I think he did a good job. I like the curve. Um, like you said, like you want like 5 mana, like it needs to be almost over by then. And I think this deck can get there.
Any suggestions you would change besides, I mean, we've talked about the shield bearer getting nerfed, but let me know what you
Yeah.
think you would change here.
So Shield Bearer definitely goes. Maybe even the Archer. I go back and forth on that because there's some gods that don't run any warded cards.
Hmm.
And so like trading with nature or yeah, other war, like it can be helpful to get a ping off every once in a while, but like sometimes like it's just a dead card with low attack and low health.
Okay.
And Enduring Shield, I really like it, but like I think a reasonable substitute would be Ramshackle. I think it's a 3/1 with God Blitz. Just as far as like it gives you an extra turn of lethal. Like if you have Ramshackle, Warmonger, Smith, it's just another God Blitz face card. But yeah. How about you? What would you swap out?
Yeah, I think I agree. Probably the shield bearer. And one thing that I think players should keep in mind, Overproof Brew is really strong. It serves as a removal with your one health creatures on the board. It could remove your own creatures as well. Keep that in mind. And I think the +2 strength and protected is really strong. But I've debated this with Muse before. I think like Overproof Brew is a nice card, but I feel like it's borderline on the win more, meaning that if you have a board that could benefit from Overproof Brew, you are probably very close to winning already, and this just
Right.
kind of seals the deal. So what I've debated with Muse about is I actually personally don't run Overproof Brew. I prefer the Red Fume Serum,
Red Fume Serum? Yeah,
which is
okay.
a core
Very
epic,
nice.
and all you need is really one creature on the board, and it gives it a +5/+5, which is I think really strong in this meta right now, especially as we've been talking about with cards with armor. +5
Mm-hmm.
+5 is more than enough to push through and break the armor. The other thing I would talk about, oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. Yeah, I was just. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so the one thing I was going to talk about, since we're talking about replacing the shield bearer, one thing that I've been experimenting with is it's not a direct substitution to the shield bearer, but it's a nice little slide in there. Is the Town Guardian, maybe a one-off copy. It's a 4 mana 3/4 that gives a +1/+1 to one of your creatures on the board. Um, it's something that I think has a decent body at 3/4, and it can give that +1/+1. So you can think of it as almost like the Viking Longship. It's 4 mana. They're both 4 mana. They're both 3/4. This one has the Blitz. The flank is really strong, so Viking Longship
Mm-hmm.
definitely. But if you're thinking about as sometimes the Viking Longship comes down on the board to make that crucial trade, if you have something on the board and you give something +1/+1, that could be the crucial trade that you're looking for as well. So it's an option to keep in mind. The Town Guardian comes down as a 3/4. You give that +1/+1 to one of your creatures on the board that needs an extra one attack to make a decent trade. And now
Mm-hmm.
you have a 3/4 sitting on the board for the next turn. So those are the two things that I would recommend on this deck. I like everything else. You know, can't really change anything else from my point of view.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I actually really like Red Fume Serum. That's played in Mythic quite a bit. I've been seeing it a lot more than another round, which I think is interesting.
Oh yeah, no, I'll just say the Red Fume is definitely a good card, but the only thing is again, it's an epic card. So it might be a little bit hard to get, but I think one copy is fine. Versus Overproof Brew is a common in the welcome set, so everybody has this. So you could probably start off with an
Mhm.
Overproof Brew. If you end up pulling a Red Fume, you could probably swap it out and give that a try.
Yeah, yeah,
All right.
perfect.
Anything else?
Um, I I completely agree with you. Yeah,
Cool.
it's interesting that there's only one there are 2 3 drops in the entire deck, but it's very low curve, so
Oh
I like
yeah,
it.
yeah. I think if you look at the current Slayer decks in the Mythic, that's not free to play. The 3 drop for War doesn't tend to be too crowded either. You might
Yeah.
add Audi, and that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's go move on to our next free-to-play deck. This one was a deck that I put together. It's the free-to-play Wellcore Nature deck. I was looking for more of a balanced curve. Even though if you're looking at just the curve here, you're looking at it looks fairly balanced across the board, but this still plays fairly fast and fairly aggro-ish, just like the other decks that you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start off here, and then Sam can share his thoughts. What I was going for, again, Shield Bearer will probably be looking something you're looking to change. What I was looking for was really take advantage of Wildfire and all the wild tribe creatures that you have available to you in nature. You have the Bladefly, the Rhino, the Ogre, the Bloodworm for frontline, Wild
Mm-hmm.
Hog. So I was really trying to get a tribal theme going as well, complementing. the usual strong nature card. So this is one of the things that Sam brought up about nature being a strong, free-to-play, beginner-friendly god, is because if you look at some of the cards that nature has that's commons, like Black Jaguar, Staff of Roots, Canopy Barrage, um, Overgrown Rhino, like, and even Bladefly, like these are really strong cards that are commons, so very easy to get. This was back when Flourish was really powerful. I did kind of think Flourish was going to get nerfed, so I actually added a little line at the end where I said if Flourish gets nerfed, you'd probably just go with Animal Bond.
Hmm.
There is a new God Power now, which is Selena's Mark. Let me see if I could pull it up here. I don't know if it shows up as here. No, it doesn't show up here. I'd have to go to the deck. So let me pull up Selena's Mark real quick so people can see what the current God Power is. That's pretty strong here.
It reminds me a lot of Nature's Grasp with just like one less damage, right?
Yeah, yeah. So right here, Selena's Mark is the current God Power of choice. Animal Bond's still strong, but Selena's Mark basically 2 mana. You get to deal 1 damage to a random enemy creature while you heal yourself for 1 as well. So what I would do is obviously don't go with Flourish anymore. Go with either Animal Bond or Selena's Mark.
Hmm.
What do you think of this deck and any suggestions, Sam?
I like the deck. I think it looks really fast. Yeah. That being said, like if you run into armor creatures, you could have a bit of a rough time, but it looks like you curved out your 3 and 4 slots really well. So yeah, I like the Overgrown Rhino. I think they're really good. And a Mooncray Cyclops may be getting a nerf, so more
Mm,
than likely that's going to be like the 4-drop staple for mythic, right? Nature decks. Lightning Strikes are really important, especially with the armor meta. The only thing, if you have them, Fey Flame Blade is, in my opinion, like probably one of the best weapons in the game, if not the best. It has 2 more durability than Staff of Roots, and you can confuse any creature on the board that you choose. You don't get the heal, but the extra 2 durability makes a huge difference, like in a scrappy zoo versus zoo matchup early game. Yeah, that's the only thing. But I understand the Staff of Roots is like a lot more practical. It's a common card. Like I understand why you put it there. Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point. I actually would have put the Faith Blade. I do agree that Faith Blade is better than Staff of Roots, but at the same time, I felt like if I'm doing a free-to-play deck, um, they would naturally have the Staff of Roots, and then if they have the Faith Blade, which is an epic, and we mentioned epics are hard to get, but if they had the Faith
Hmm.
Blade, I think they'd figure out that they'd swap it in automatically. So this was sort
Yeah,
of my call it conservative suggestion, and I figure people would understand how to make changes to it. So I think Shield Bearer, you'd probably switch this to the Trial Spirit, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And I think when I put this deck together, as Sam mentioned, we were in a faster meta. So Bloodworm could probably be something that you could change out, maybe put another 3/4, or as Sam suggested, either double up on the Ogre or he mentioned the Battle Sworn. What do you think about the Battle Sworn in the Nature deck?
Uh, for 5-drop, what 5 drops does core? I mean, I don't think it's a bad card, but like you said, you're going for the wildfire synergy. I was just thinking if there's okay. I have Veil Warden Minotaur, also an
Hmm.
epic card, but it is also Wild Tribe, so it would synergize really well with the Wildfire. That being said, it is an epic, and it took me forever to get to. So like, yeah, but I understand like like you gave yourself like a realistic condition to build a deck, and the deck is great. Like I have no doubt that this deck does really well in Mythic. But just for a 5-drop, like that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, that's a good call. Actually, you're right. Totally forgot about that one, but you're right. If I was going to make a change, and take out the Bloodworm maybe, or even the Ogre. Instead of the Battlesworn, I would go Veil Warden Minotaur. So that's a good call. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and his passive is so good. Like if you have more, if you heal past full, when he dies you heal 4, and if you go past full, you get a random nature card. So you can get like a Avatar Nature, like which is a really great like you can get any card. And I feel like whenever I play people that have it, they always end up getting like a really great nature card.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they always get,
After yeah, right, yeah, yeah.
yeah, they always get
Um,
the
ap
card that turns the tide on you, right?
yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I think we should bring up too. Nature, as we say it, is free to play slash new player friendly. But one thing that will um, can end up biting you is it is also the confused class, meaning a lot of the creatures on here have the confused tag to pay, to offset the extra stats that you get. So there'll be times when you will get frustrated playing nature just because you're putting together a great deck and it's consistent. However, the only thing that's not consistent is where your creatures go when you attack. So one
Oh
thing to
yeah.
keep in mind.
And I'm pretty sure besides Wildfire, every single nature spell is also random. Canopy Barrage, Lightning Strike, um, Frenzied Ritual, Enchanted Vines. I mean, even the God Power, right? Selena's Grasp or
Yeah,
Selena's Mark is like,
right.
yeah, a lot of RNG in nature. That being said, you get much better stats. So if you're lucky, uh, it's it. I mean, I think it's one of the better classes, regardless of luck. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good call. Let's move on to the next one. This one's the free-to-play death deck that Lion Unchained put together. You're seeing the same theme here. As we mentioned, it's going to be a low curve deck that's plays fairly fast and aggressive. What are your thoughts on this deck, Sam?
Um, uh, I mean, I understand the curve. Um, yeah. I don't know. What do you think about it?
I think it's a little bit too heavy on the one drops here.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. 16 one drops. That is a lot. Yeah.
yeah, I think I mean one thing that stands out to me right away is it's missing skeleton heavies. I would probably throw skeleton heavies in here
Absolutely.
over the War Maiden. Um, I think a lot of the death decks do top out at 3 to 4. I like the Famished Ghoul. I see what line's going here with. Famished Ghoul with all these wide tokens can potentially
Hmm.
give you a lot of card draw, but I think the problem with that is you're going to be drawing a lot of cheap creatures with it, which aren't really too impactful. And then I do see what he's going for. He has the old ritual, but I think it's too much of a combo wombo deck when you have these cards like this. It's nice to pull it off, but I don't know how consistent that be because these tokens can also be cleared off easily by your opponent. You mentioned the Faithful Blade. Faithful Blade will clear a lot of these creatures off the board. Um,
Yeah. You get so much value off of this deck. The Viking, War Maiden, Wicked Fae, Card Shark. Like, yeah,
right.
all clear everything. Okay. So, like you said, skeleton heavy can probably substitute the. What would you swap out?
Probably the War Maiden. Um,
Hmm.
what I would actually do, first of all, is I do like the idea here, but if I was going to make a rush death deck, I would probably not play the old ritual. I'd probably go for more of sort of following the other decks that we talked about, a slow curve fast deck, but with more body to it. The skeleton heavy moves to that point.
Yeah.
Maybe throw. We've seen the Hunt Warden in the other decks. A
Hmm.
little bit more 3 drops. I think having one Bronze Servant and 2 Vrox on the 3 drop is not enough. I think I'd probably add a couple Hunt Wardens and then maybe a top end of the Famished Ghoul only. And then, I would basically what I'm trying to say is I would spread this out a little bit more, but keep it low
Yeah.
curve like he did, but just kind of spread it out a little bit more. And we're talking about that with the Skeleton Heavy and the Hunt Wardens.
Yeah. And Death has some pretty decent cards. I know this is a bit higher curve than we've been kind of talking about, but Vampiric Skull is a free to play card. It's a 6/6 Nether, and you can pull any 3 cost mana or less from your Void. You give it Soulless, but you bring it to the board. So, like, if you play a Hunt Warden and it dies, on turn 6, you get a 6/6, plus you can pull back that Hunt Warden and get a 3/4 all in one turn, which is just like a huge swing turn. Uh, I think it's a really strong card that doesn't get as much play, mostly because Decaying Rhino is a 4 mana 6/6, which is getting nerfed because that's way too strong. Um, yeah, in Writhing Spirit, it's a 1 mana 3/3. I don't think, yeah, he doesn't have it in this. I think it's strong if you're running a zoo deck. There's a few other choices. Even Void Banshee, 2 mana 4/3. They do have negative effects, but I think maybe we could substitute out some of the like really low stat creatures, especially with how the meta has shifted. We talked about having something a bit more substantial. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, yeah, now that you're bringing up these cards, yeah, that's what I would agree with that. I would take out the old rituals, reduce some of the one mana, like take out the shield bearers, maybe the card shark as well, the
Mhm.
Janissary, add in the skeleton heavy, hunt warden, add in the I would definitely add the Void Banshee. The Writhing Spirit, I think I'm a little iffy on, but the
Yeah. No.
Void Banshee,
Yeah.
yeah, the Void Banshee I like. I actually do run it myself on my aggro death decks. And then I would also agree with you. I would throw one top end of a Vampiric Skull, sort of that 1/6 mana play where you do a huge swing turn and hopefully that's enough to seal the deal. So I do like your suggestions here. I would probably, yeah, top end with one Vampiric Skull, uh, Famished Skull at, one or two depending, and then two more 3 drops like the Hunt Wardens, and then Skeleton Heavy and the Void Banshee.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the skeleton heavy is just so good. It's a what 2/4 right, 6 points of stats for 2 mana. Within a Nubian tag, like it's just such a strong card. I think it's a like a staple in every free to play deck. Like if you don't have Pyramid Wardens, and even if you do, like maybe you put them in anyway. Like I run Skeleton Heavies in my light deck alongside of Pyramid Wardens.
Right.
Um, just the stats are so good. Yeah.
Yeah, they trade very well, and they
Hmm.
maintain board presence. I agree. Yeah, so a couple of changes to the death deck, but I think the overall idea is fairly intact. The god power he suggested was Blood Ritual. I agree. I would go with Blood Ritual as well. Help you maintain control of the board.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
A Blood Ritual goes through Protected, which is really helpful. It's
Right.
actually like really strong ability.
Yeah, it ignores armor as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. That is correct. Yes, it also goes through armor. Yeah, it's very strong.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the last free-to-play deck here. Our last free-to-play deck is a Zoo/Rush Deception deck suggested by Dan the Dev. No comment, so we're going to interpret this the best we can. You want to take first crack, Sam?
Sure. So I mean, the same theme. Maybe swap out Shield Bearer for Trail Spirit. Um, on the Deception side, I like what he has. Dark Knife, Switchblade Duelist, Filthy Assassin. Hunting Trap is an epic. What would you use for a substitute to substitute that card?
Yeah, Hunting Trap is one of those cards that's also hard to get. But what I would probably swap it for is either, I think it's Trapdoor.
Okay, yeah.
I
Hmm.
played Trapdoor a little bit myself when I didn't have a Hunting Trap. Um, it it doesn't really remove the creature, but it gets it off the board. They'll put it back the next turn. I've seen some people also try. It's not quite the same, um, but because it costs more. But something that people other play is Spike T, but it does cost 2 mana more. So it's almost not like a good substitute. It's
Yeah.
but I would say hunting trapdoor would be the closest one to hunting trap.
Okay. Yeah. That's a really good substitute. Um, yeah, it's very low cover. I don't know about Rampart personally, just because it doesn't do anything. It buys you time, but this doesn't look like a deck that needs time, right? Like you're yeah, like you're trying to kill him as quickly as possible. Um, that's just me. I don't know. How do you feel about Rampart?
Yeah, same thing. If we're trying to do a zoo type deck, um, the gameplay doesn't really go hand in hand with stalling. So I would take out the ramparts. There's a ton of good 1 mana cards that I would suggest instead of rampart.
Okay. I
So I would suggest probably one of the hidden ones, like a Dockside Prowler,
oh
or
yeah.
or the
think there's an Amazon that's also like a pretty much the same stats, but just with the Amazon tag that's hidden.
Right, the Wiccan
Um,
Warrior.
Wiccan Warrior, yeah.
Yeah, and then also I would probably what I've run in Deception myself. What I do like in the 1 mana slot as well is the Drider Sailweaver. I like having
Okay.
that in Deception as well because it does have the ward on it. So I think
And
go ahead
oh, I'm sorry. Would you take thievery or cheat with
with Zoo Deception.
yeah,
Yeah, I think for me, 99% of the time I go with cheat, which is now called Orpheo's Distraction.
right. Yeah, I personally deception is like I just struggle with it and hidden rush deception in particular, it's just a really hard it's a very difficult deck to play and it's really unforgiving. Like you have to play it really well or I don't think you should play it, right? It's and like you can win some games by turn 4, right? If you draw really well, but otherwise it's really scrappy and yeah, so I'm how do you feel about the deuteria, I guess?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah, deception, hidden rush deception is not straightforward. It's with the name deception, you're almost having to be creative and look at different ways to use the god power and the cards to really find the lethal and push the most amount of damage.
Hmm.
At first glance, cheat slash Orpheus distraction looks like it's an offensive god power, but you could also use defensively to hide your own creatures. So that's what Sam's talking about, where hidden rush deception has little intricacies that you have to think about. Um, and then answering his second question about Deuteria, I absolutely think Deuteria is a decent card, but not in rush decks, low curve decks. And the reason for that is that when you're putting together a low curve deck that's aiming to finish off your opponent by turn 5/6, every card has a purpose, and every card's purpose is to push your opponent closer and closer to lethal. And I think Deuteria with its roar effect is really strong, but what it does is actually kind of adds a little bit more cards to your deck, and what that does is it slows you down. And I'll give you an example. So for this deck, let's say that by turn 3 you want to pull your Jinx Blade Duelist, so you can start gaining. You're looking at you have board control and you're looking to start gaining +1 health every turn from the Jinx Blade Duelist. But then you added Deuteria, so now you're drawing the 3/3 Deuteria instead of the Jinx Blade Duelist. That's a big difference because now your 3/3 Deuteria is pretty good for stats, 3 mana, 1 mana 3/3, but at the same time, it's not getting the effect that you had accounted for when you had put the cards that you put into your deck. So generally, I don't recommend having Deuteria in low curve decks. I think it does have a place in mid range and control decks and very specific aggro decks if you build for it specifically. But I don't generally in run of the mill aggro decks. I don't like Deuteria in there. What do you think?
I completely agree with you. Even I really like the card. If I'm playing it in a control deck, I like playing it later in the game. Uh, just because like even like you said, there like you need like each deck is built with specific tools in it, and so it's nice to get a really inexpensive creature like when you're ahead, but when you're behind and you're searching for like that tool that you need, and you get like a 1 mana 3/3 or 5/5, it's like okay, that's good, but that's not going to save me, or like that's not going to push the point of lethal that I needed. Um, yeah, I don't think that it's a bad card. I really do like it, but it doesn't belong in every deck. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, so recapping what Sam and I are suggesting for this free-to-play zoo deck, probably replace the Teria, the Shield Bearers probably need to go out. Rampart, I would replace. Um, I would probably Thievery, we would probably go with Orpheus Distraction instead for the God Power. Some things we suggested where 1 mana cards like the hidden cards, which are Dockside Prowler, even the Drider Sailweaver for Ward, or the Wiccan Warrior. So those are some good 1 mana substitution for your to keep your low curve. If you don't have Hunting Trap, you could try the Trap Door. I do have a shout out here. I do like the Poison Dagger. Um, Normally you wouldn't think this card is strong, but with 3 attack, it actually breaks through a lot of the strong armor cards that have 2 armor max. Because what I've found is if you have 1 armor or 2 armor, relics that only do 1 or 2 damage doesn't break the armor and you don't get the effect off. And the effect here is deadly. So with 3 attack here, it actually goes over some of the problem cards which have 2 armor, and you're able to get the effect off of deadly. So I do like the 2 poison daggers here.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. That's actually not bad.
Yeah, because for example, we talked about the
Guild
Guild
Enforcer.
Enforcer with 2 armor. So a
Hmm.
Slip Blade with 1 attack won't touch the Guild Enforcer at all, but this would remove the Guild Enforcer.
Yeah, and that's a favorable trade too. Yeah, that's great. It's a really great point.
Yeah. So yeah, so other than this, I think since Dan is recommending Assassin's Aim, only 1 copy though, I think substituting the Shield Bearer for Trial Spirits for that extra health will go a long way for your Assassin's Aim buff. I like the Felid Janissary here, giving extra health. I do have another shout out here for this deck. If you're not feeling the Felid Janissary, another card that I do like to run in my aggro deception deck is a welcome card, which does see some play, is the Bedeviled Shadow. It's a 3 mana 3/3. It comes down hidden, so it's almost guaranteed to get an attack off the next turn because it's hidden, unless your opponent has a way to deal with that. So I like having the Bedeviled Shadow sometimes in my Hidden Rush decks, along with some other viable options at the 3 mana slot besides the Jinx Blade Duelist, is a Shadow Paladin if you're looking for a little bit more damage, 1 damage more. And also, um, this is dependent. Some aggro decks do put the Vault Vagabond in there just because it does allow the aggro decks to generate a little bit of value where you're copying your opponent's card onto your hand. Uh, Playing aggro fast decks, you tend to empty out your hand really fast. So playing a Vault Vagabond, there is a argument to playing Vault Vagabond because you can offset the lower stats with getting a little bit of value generated into your hand. Anything else, Sam, or what do you think of those?
I think those are great substitutes. I really like the Bedeviled Shadow, the 3/3. Like you mentioned, hiding your own creatures. The extra health on it as well as attack gives you a couple turns to swing with it. If they don't have a front line, you can hide it for at least 2 turns, getting effectively 9 damage. I mean, if it came down to it, but yeah, I think that's a great substitute. And the 1/3, the Volt Vagabond, that is just the most frustrating card to deal with when they're taking the top deck of your card every time they hit your face. And it also has flank, which is even more annoying. So it can go around frontline. So you don't necessarily have to worry about pinging their frontline, right? Like you can, if you have another creature to attack, you can go around and then hide it, and you can get 3 turns of value. Yeah, it becomes a priority target, even though it doesn't have the attack, like you said, just the value generation. Yeah, that can win games on its own. Yeah, I like those substitutes. That's really great.
Yeah, and one thing about this card too, as Sam mentioned, besides stealing your opponent's top card, you're also stealing information. So if you attack with this card as the first thing you do on your turn, what you've done is you've gained information on what your opponent's next card going to be. So then you could plan your turn accordingly. And if you're seeing it's a cheap little creature, you probably say, hey, I could go wide here and be aggressive, and he's not going to have an answer. Or if you see something like they have a spell coming up that could be removal, then you hold back your resources and just accept that they're going to wipe you the next turn. So the information that Vault Vagabond can give you is also a little side bonus.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. Anything else on this deck, Sam?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, you're definitely the deception guy. Like, I'm not that person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. Yeah, I think we all bring up different, you know, key points and observations. So yeah, whether you're an expert in the deck or not, you played against it, so you have some experience with it. So valuable insights regardless.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. So those are our 6 free-to-play decks that community members put together for Gods Unchained. Keep in mind those free-to-play decks are meant to get you started and into the mid-rank with the right piloting and crafty play. You probably can take them to Mythic, but at the same time, you're earning cards at that point, so you might want to supplement the deck. But those are definitely good starting free-to-play decks. Again, I want to thank Sam for taking the time and sharing game information and helping us break down and offer suggestions on the free-to-play decks. Anything else you want to add, Sam?
Nope. I think we covered it all pretty well. Yeah, just swap out the shield bearer for trial spirits. The the one attack seems like it's great, but then the shield bearer kind of just becomes a value right, favor right for your opponent. It's a free trade, and you're not getting favor, which doesn't sound like a lot, but every hit or every favorable trade that you make, every hit to the god's face, you get 3 favor. So that losing the one attack really makes a big difference just in like really close matchups. So definitely Charles Spirit over Shield Bear, but that's it. Yeah.
Right on. Cool. Before we sign off, Sam, anything you want to plug? I know you've been streaming a lot. You want to share your social connections?
Sure. Yeah. So you can find me. I stream 6 days a week at twitch.com / the SamBam, TheeSambamb, and then Twitter, same, the SamBam.
Yeah, right on. Thank you. So for those of you that want to follow Sam Bam more, I will grab all his social links and contact information that he just shared. I'll put it in the video description so you can go ahead and follow up and get more information from Sam. Besides streaming and sharing his information here, Sam is definitely a top player, uh, consistent and weekend ranked, um, part of a elite esports team. So definitely check him out, guys, if you have not. And again, I want to thank you for spending the time. I really appreciate it, Sam, and looking forward to seeing you in game.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.